good title for a video. The 45 blowers have no defense, which they never did, and they still don't. Look, the case has been made. Almost everything in the impeachment hearings this week fleshed out and backed up the charge that 45 muscled Ukraine for political gain. The pending question is what precisely the House and its Democratic majority will decide to include in the articles of impeachment. What statutes or standards they will assert the squatter violated. What was said consistently undermined 45's case, but more deadly was what has never been what has never been said yet. In the 2 months since Speaker Nancy Pelosi announced a formal impeachment inquiry was underway, in the 2 weeks since the Intelligence Committee's public hearings began, no one, even in the White House, has said anything like he wouldn't do that, or that would be so unlike him. His so-called friends know he would do it, and it's exactly like him. 45 doesn't have any friends. That's one thing about that. The week's hearings were not a seamless success for Democrats. On Tuesday, they seemed to be losing the thread, but by Wednesday and Thursday, it was restored. Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman was not a persuasive witness and did not move the story forward, because in spite of the obvious patriotism reflected in his record, he was annoying, smug, and so full of shit. He appeared in full dress uniform with 3 rows of ribbons. When Republican cunt Devin Nunes called him Mr. Vindman, he quickly corrected him. Ranking member is Lieutenant Colonel Vindman. Oh snap, as he described his areas of authority at the National Security Council, he seemed to glisten with self-regard. You got the impression he saw himself as fully in charge of U.S. policy toward Ukraine. Asked if it was true that the government offered to make him their defense minister, he said yes with no apparent embarrassment. I don't know about you, but I don't like it when a foreign government gets a sense of a U.S. military officer and concludes he might fit right in. A Ukrainian official later said the job offer was a joke. Lieutenant Colonel Vindman self-valorized, as other witnesses have, and tugged in his opening statement on America's heartstrings by addressing his father, who brought his family from the Soviet Union 40 years ago. He says, "Do not worry, I'll be fine for telling the truth. The committee has paid entirely too much attention to the witnesses' emotions. How did that make you feel without upsetting you too much? I'd like to show you the excerpts from the call. I am sure the questioners were told to take this tack by communications professionals who believe this is how you manipulate housewives. In fact, a mother at home with a vacuum in one hand and a crying baby in the other would look at them, listen, and think, and you guys represent us to other countries, you gotta butch up." Later, as Colonel Vindman returned to work and clearly wanted to be seen, he posed grinning for photos in front of the Eisenhower Executive Office building. It is not only 45 who suffers from the absence of gravity. On Wednesday, Gordon Sondland, ambassador to the European nation, was both weirdly jolly and enormously effective in doing 45 damage. He followed the squatter's orders that there was a quid pro quo. Everyone was in the loop. It was no secret. Dumbass Giuliani was the point man, but while Sondland worked at the express direction of the squatter. It was his third try at a truthful sworn testimony, and it was completely believable. It was kind of the ball game. He seemed like a guy with nothing to lose, or maybe a guy who'd already lost much. On Thursday, Fiona Hill, the former White House Russia expert, was all business, a serious woman you don't want to mess with. She reoriented things, warning that those who excuse or don't wish to see Russian propaganda efforts against America and targeting its elections are missing the obvious. The suspicion of the squatter and his allies that Ukraine is the great culprit in the 2016 election is a fictional narrative. They are in fact bowing to disinformation Russia spreads to cover its tracks and confuse the American people and its political class. She dismissed the squatter's operatives' efforts to get Ukraine's new president to investigate his country's alleged meddling as a domestic political errand. She and other diplomats who were involved in national security, foreign policy, and the interests of the operatives and the diplomats had diverged. She warned Sondland that this was all going to blow up, and these are true words. What became obvious in the hearings was the sober testimony from respectful diplomats, not disgruntled staffers with nutty memoirs, but people of stature who don't ordinarily talk about how the administration operates. It became clear in a new and public way that pretty much everyone around the squatter has been forced for 3 years to work around his poor judgment and unpredictably in order to do their jobs. He no doubt knows this and no doubt doesn't care because he's the boss. They do it his way. But we saw how damaging this is, how ultimately destructive not only to coherence and respectability, but to the squatter himself. After Thursday's hearings, I felt some free-floating sympathy for high 45 appointees who joined early. You can say they knew what they signed up for, but it's human to have hope, and they surely had it when they came aboard. They were no doubt ambitious. They wanted a big job, but they probably wanted to do good too. They were optimistic. How bad can it be? And then there would have been vanity. I can handle him, but they couldn't. He not only doesn't know where the line is, he has never wanted to know, so he can cross it with impunity, without consciousness of a bad act, or one that might put him in danger. There were no match for his unpredictability and resentments, which at any moment could undo everything. So as to impeachment itself, the case has been so clearly made you wonder what exactly the Senate will be left doing. How will they hold a lengthy trial with the case this clear? Who exactly will be the squatters' witnesses? Those who testify who testify he didn't do what he appears to have done and would never do it? Procedures, rules, and definitions aren't fully worked out in the Senate, but we are approaching December and the clock is ticking. A full-blown trial on charges most everyone will believe are true, and with an election in less than a year, will seem absurd to all but diehards and do the country no good. So the reasonable guess is Republican senators were called to let the people decide. In a divided country, this is the right call, but they should take seriously the idea of censoring him for abuse of power. 45 would be the first squatter to be censored. Since Andrew Jackson, to whom historians have always compared him. In the end, he will probably be proud of a tightening of the connection.